Weekdays Live. We're talking about what you're talking about.
Get real.
You all ready for this? Dun 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 dun. No.
Y'all,
Just
this
stop.
is a sham. Welcome to DBL. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm here with my friends Erica and Al. Feeling good?
Yeah. I'm feeling good.
Running through some business ideas before the show.
We were. And
I always come up with business ideas. Like at home, like this would be perfect, but I never execute them.
Well, it's hard. I don't think people that have the ideas are the people that are good at executing them. It's a weird thing. You got to find the perfect
and it's very
person.
specific.
Mm-hmm. That's why you need someone who's going to invest in your ideas and help you see them through.
Is her name Erica Cobb?
No, but you might want to talk to your boy.
You don't even know the idea. I'm passing. It's a hard pass. All right, we're getting a first look at the new Tiger King docuseries called Joe vs. Carol, starring Kate McKinnon as Carol Baskin and John Cameron Mitchell as Joe Exotic. Let's have a look.
Carol Baskin.
I thought it was hilarious.
It was hilarious, wasn't it?
Tiger in the Wild's got to be laser focused.
I know if we can just sit down and talk, we can come to an understanding.
So it's war.
It's war.
I gotta tell you, that clip made me a little bit more interested. The real Carol Baskin issued a statement saying she and her husband look forward to watching and expects it to be a lot more entertaining than this situation was in real life. It debuts on Peacock on March 3rd. So I said that about the little clip we saw because it's more of a spoof. It's not retelling the same story that we know, and I'm more interested in the spoof version with Kate McKinnon more so than I am in the real version at this point.
Yeah, you're looking at me like I actually watched either. I did not. I held very steadfast. The more people were trying to, make me feel like I was missing out on something, the more I decided I wasn't going to watch it. So I'm the wrong person. Al?
I'll just say this, and Erica, you can respond to this. I feel like because Tiger King was so big when it was, which is right when everybody was first on lockdown, those first 2 weeks where everybody was at home, it was very of its time, and I think that's why it gained such a cult classic.
Right.
But now that crazy lockdown seems like it was 10 years ago, because now people kind of go about their lives as safely as possible, and we talk and we test. It just seems very different. So it seems like the Tiger King caught that wave, but now that wave has died down, and it's like no one thinks about that time. So Tiger King's kind of put away for a while, maybe in 10 years, but I think it's too soon right now.
What do you think about Kate McKinnon being attached to it to make it more of a comedy?
I think that's a good idea.
Right?
Because unless you're going to do a dramatic reenactment, which we've already had a bunch of times, I think she's a good actor that can play kind of that straight character that always seems like she's about to break with a laugh, but she never does.
Yes.
She's got that kind of weird style that a lot of great comics have, to be that deadpan where she knows this is ridiculous, but her character never lets that through. So I'm excited to see how she plays this role, but I think she's going to be great at it.
Yeah, I think so too. I got turned. I was going to totally bash this.
Me too.
And then I saw it and I was like, you know what? It's not so bad. Kate McKinnon.
Don't let that stop you. Go ahead and bash it.
I'll wait till it comes out. All right, actor Peter Dinklage has something to say about Disney's live-action remake of Snow White. Speaking on a podcast, Peter said while Disney was proud to cast Latina actress Rachel Zegler as Snow White, the story itself is very problematic. Let's listen.
You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
All right, Al, you were laughing during that. What's your take on this?
I think it's true, but as somebody that's got kids, Cobby, it's just when you try and read some of these old stories, they're like the whole Rapunzel, like grab her hair and pull, like that's weird. The Cinderella, like some stranger finds your shoe and now you got to marry him. All those stories are super weird. If somebody's like, "Oh, I found your shoe. I followed you around for 2 days. I found the person." Why would you touch that shoe? It's a weird. Would you ever find a shoe in the street and then find out whose it was? That's weird.
No,
all those stories are weird.
That is very weird, and I appreciate that angle that you took. Obviously, Peter is being, a little comical about it, but also he's being very serious when he says, "I guess I'm not loud enough," and that really is the struggle that any minority population has in the world. Because until you have enough people, and generally that means it takes allies to come together to help you advance your cause. And if you don't have an allyship for little people, then no, people aren't going to pay attention. He's absolutely right. They were trying to advance one side without thinking of the totality of what this project is really doing.
Couldn't you take any story? I get your frustration with going back to nurse. Full disclosure, behind the scenes, Al has a real problem with these nursery rhymes and Home Alone. He doesn't like the plot to any of these things. He talks
Home
about
Alone
very
2 specifically.
around the office.
Yeah.
He knew his way around New York City. I lived there for 5 years. I didn't know the Upper West Side like that.
See, I get triggered on cancel culture. You bring up Home Alone, Al is going off. But here's my take on it. If you take a 2022 lens and look back on any story, not just nursery rhymes, but movies from the 80s, 90s, 70s, whatever era you want to go, you're going to have this conflict, right?
Absolutely.
Well, yes, I believe. I mean, we have so many examples
Right.
of that. I think what's standing out about what Peter is saying is that they're doing a live action remake.
Right.
And so in order to do that, like this isn't, he's saying little people are not characters to be played. They're people, and they're going to be like, it's going to be like a satire, you know, of a person. So I think that's something a little different. Like, they were very conscious in this respect, but hey, what about us? Which I totally respect that conversation.
Let me play devil's advocate. I know we have to move on, but what if somebody said, okay, we hear what you're saying, Peter, so we're going to have them played by typically sized actors. Same storyline, but would people then say, oh, little people are being excluded from roles that we were meant to, almost the way people say an actor in a wheelchair should be playing somebody in a wheelchair. So, I mean, and I'm not comparing those two things.
No, there's always going to be something.
You know?
It gave me, I thought the conversation was very thought-provoking.
Absolutely, because
most people, right, aren't going to think about it because it doesn't affect us.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the thing. If it doesn't affect you, it's not on your radar, and this man is saying, hey, like, maybe it doesn't affect you, but it affects me.
Right. Totally get it. Totally get Al's point as well. All right. This story, I kind of like this story. Actress Cheryl Hines, well, I'm a Curb Your Enthusiasm guy, is trying to distance herself from her husband. So over the weekend, her husband, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., spoke at a rally and compared vaccine mandates to action taken by the Nazis during the Holocaust, adding that even Jews back then had more freedoms than people who choose not to get vaccinated. Cheryl did reply on Twitter to all the people asking her questions, saying, "My husband's opinions are not a reflection of my own. While we love each other, we differ on many current issues." So what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said, this is not the reason why I like this story. I'm using this as a jump-off point to a lot of husbands and wives, a lot of couples have opposite points of view, especially in politics, right? So that's why I like this story, because it's very poignant, I think, to real people. What Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said was very extreme.
Exactly.
To acknowledge that.
Exactly. I remember probably around the summer of when we first went into lockdown, I remember looking at my husband and saying, I am so grateful that we are aligned on our core values.
Yeah.
Because people are losing their minds and their spouses because they realize that they have fundamental differences on a lot of these issues that are dividing not only the country but their households. So I think this is probably one of the most common things that came out of the pandemic and lockdown and all of these things, that we were forced to look at each other and be like, who are you really at the core? Who are you really when things become truly consequential? And a lot of people didn't like who they were sleeping next to.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people had to get over that hump, right? And kind of grow as a couple.
Or not get over it.
Exactly.
You know, Erica, as you were talking, I promise I didn't plan to say this today. It made me think about it because you were talking about spouses. I'm not going to say which one I was at. An old apartment complex of mine. I've lived in many, so you won't be able to track it down. And I was talking to the woman that ran the whole thing because I was leaving and I needed to fill some paperwork out. It was near the holidays, and I was like, "Oh, are you and the family getting together for Christmas holidays, whatever?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm seeing my boys for the first time in 11 years. My ex-boyfriend didn't believe in Christmas, so I haven't had a Christmas with my sons that were like at 18 now since they were like 8. And they broke up, and now, so I'm like, so you never saw your kids during?" And she's like, "No." And I was like writing, but I was like, my hands were shaking. I couldn't imagine not being with my kids, but that was her spouse, and she made a decision to give up a decade and a half worth of Christmases with her sons. So these are the decisions that people have to make. They don't just affect you and your spouse. The fallout from that is everything. So it's a lot. So Jeff, how do you navigate that? Did you guys talk before you got married about like the big things?
No, we didn't, man. We didn't. We just I thought we kind of got along with things, and one of the problems that we have was communication, and we worked on that during our marriage. And now it seems like the big divide is like political issues, right? Mm-hmm. Jordan will see a headline, my wife, on like whether it's the news or like on her Instagram, and we a lot of the times cover it on the show, right? So she goes, could you believe this happened? I go, hold on a second. There's more to that. Let me break it down to you. And I think that's a lot of problems. People see these headlines and then they both maybe have the same issue. They don't do enough research on it. And then they have these spot decisions like, oh, I really hate that person. I'm like, hold on. There's more to the story. This is what's going on here. And I think we get through a lot of our issues that we have politically maybe from this show, because I'm like, oh, we talked about it, we dug a little deeper, and then if we don't do something on the show, I'm like, that headline seems a little bait and hook.
You can tell.
Let me go down the rabbit hole a little bit, and then you find out, hey, it isn't what I thought it was at the first place. So I think doing some research really will help your relationship in some sort of sense.
Perfect.
Research. Who does that?
I go with my gut.
Google this. That's too much work. Coming up on DBL, Hugh Hefner's son is defending his dad as a new documentary about the Playboy Mansion gets released. I actually watched this last night. Very interesting. And Janet Jackson shares a glimpse into her relationship with her brother Michael. That's next.
Closed captioning provided by
Yeah, so we were just talking about how we really enjoyed that last block, just talking about things that a lot of people can relate to.
Right.
I mean, there were so many issues that have been covered over the past couple years, especially because we've been such a captive audience. Not that there weren't issues before lockdown, it's just that we're more connected to them because they're a little bit more in our face. It caused us to put some action behind a lot of things. And I think that a lot of people understood that maybe I don't know this person as much as I thought I did. I thought about when you talked about your relationship with Jordan, my first marriage, I didn't have that talk, about like where we were politically. We didn't delve into those things, but because I got married again later, that was amongst some of the top things that I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page on, because I realized that it was very important. If you're going to grow with someone, as you guys have figured out how to do, you got to have that talk.
Do you think it's because we're getting older or because we do this show that we're more into politics? Because I got to be honest, before this show, if you named someone from the cabinet, I'd be like, who's that? I wouldn't even know. Like Lindsey Graham, I'd be like, what's she doing? Yeah. I wouldn't even know that was a man. So, seriously. But do you think it's because we're getting older, we're more into our issues, or do you think it's because of the show we're focused on it? What do you think it is?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think we all, as a country, have become more political, not just us in our bubble. Yeah, I really do think it has a lot to do with the pandemic and the fact that people were a lot more invested in what was happening in the world, how politics, think about how many people got registered to vote just in the past 2 years alone. Stacey Abrams got over 800,000, 1 million people registered. Yeah. What does that tell you? That's
maybe you're right. Maybe it's just where we are.
I never talked politics.
Me neither.
Until like the last 4 or 5 years. You're exactly right. You are right.
15 seconds.
Welcome back. So Janet Jackson is dishing more about her relationship with her late brother Michael. In her new documentary that will air later this month, Janet said, growing up, Michael used to bully her over her weight. He even called her names like pig, horse, slut, and cow. One of those doesn't really address the weight. But anyways, she laughed. They said they laughed about it, but inside it would hurt her. Janet revealed her weight issues started when she landed the role of Penny on Good Times, where she played the daughter of an abusive mother. In the doc, she said she is an emotional eater, so when she gets stressed, food comforts her. I think that last part, is relatable to everybody, at least me. I know food comforts me when I get a little depressed. I'm like, I'll just eat a bag of chips and make myself feel better. But going back to Janet and her relationship with Michael, I'm intrigued about this documentary.
I am too. I mean, Janet has been so quiet. And for
as famous as she is, she's really famous.
So quiet.
Yeah.
Even I'm not trying to name drop, but like when I got to interview her a couple times, still so quiet. Like, I mean, just a very
part of the intrigue.
Yes, yes. So she's a person, when she speaks, you want to listen because you don't get the privilege of hearing from her very often. I think some of the things she's talking about growing up with a sibling is kind of a part of growing up with a sibling sometimes. We're very brutal to one another, but at the same time, I'm 40 and my siblings are, much older now, and we are the first ones to defend each other, but we were always the first ones to offend each other.
I think you hit it right on the head. But if you think about, the relationship she had with Jermaine Dupri and like how his personality, very low key, very chill. And like you can see how those two personalities would mesh so well. So that's why I was a little surprised that she was going to talk about something so personal, because talking about Michael Jackson, you have to know going in that there's almost no right answers. You can say what happened, but he's such a polarizing figure that no matter what you say, it's going to kick a couple hornet's nests. So the fact that she's opening up, I think is less almost about her fans and more about her because we all have things inside of us and they need to come out. And Janet is no different than anybody else. I'm sure she had things that she grew up that she was different, things that were really great that she wants the world to know, and she wants them to all get out there. And I'm glad she's using her own platform and her narrative so no one gets the chance to twist it.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing it myself because, again, we see that headline, talking about headlines, and she uses her brother Michael Jackson, which is a big name. She was like, Tito called me a pig. I don't know if anyone really cares, right? She's taking Michael Jackson, who's very controversial, maybe the biggest pop star of all time. That's the headline we see. So I'm wondering how she would say that in the docuseries. Like you said, I had two older brothers. If you said Jeff had a tragic childhood, they rolled him up in a carpet and fired hockey pucks at him. That's what they did. You know what I mean? But that's what older brothers, that's what they did. You know what I mean? So it's how you played a narrative and what music you play in the background could really shift how that story goes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Get your Let's be honest. She didn't put that out as the sizzle. That was put out to indicate that she is going to speak about Michael in some level.
Exactly. But it's just we were talking about those headlines.
But it gets people excited.
It gets you in there. All right, coming up on DBL, Hugh Hefner's son is defending his dad. I should defend my brothers. They were very kind. If you are looking into that. This shocking new documentary that's not painting Hugh in the best light. We're going to talk about it.
Are you?
On your side, viewer Jim from Sparta asked us to verify, with the Omicron virus running rampant, what has happened to COVID-19 and the Delta virus? Did they disappear? Our sources, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Data Tracker, and Dr. Liam Sullivan, a Spectrum Health adult infectious disease specialist.
There are a few cassette players around nowadays, but they're few and far between, and they're extremely rare, whereas everybody pretty much listens. The vast majority of the people, like you said, are listening to music by cloud streaming services nowadays. So it's kind of made everything else obsolete. And that's actually a good way to look at a variant.
In biological terms, says Sullivan, it comes down to the evolutionary advantage of a strain like Omicron over the earlier, less virulent mutations that have slowly faded into the background.
It undergoes evolution as it's circulating more and more through the human population, and it's finding ways to circulate. It will completely displace the previous variants, and the previous variants because they no longer have that survival advantage, they sort of just fade into obscurity.
That bears out in the CDC's data tracker, which has charted Omicron's course since the mutated virus began spreading throughout the U.S. late last year. With Delta then still dominant, it registered just 7.4% of all cases in early December. But then watch this. The data shows the more contagious strain made up an estimated 99% of all coronavirus cases as of mid-month, pushing its precursor, the less transmissible Delta, into smaller isolated pockets that now make up less than half a percentage point of total infections.
Delta is still circulating in the U.S. It's not entirely gone yet. Delta's probably gonna go away.
So we can verify. Yes, the other strains have all but vanished as newer, more contagious variants have emerged and pushed out earlier, less adaptable versions of themselves, which, according to our experts, will likely also be the case for the Delta variant. With your Verify, I'm Charlie Tinker.
Welcome back. More accusations about life in the Playboy Mansion from former Playmate Holly Madison. So in the docuseries Secrets of Playboy that aired last night, Holly said she was afraid to leave the mansion because Hef actually had a mountain of revenge porn he could use against her. She also said her time at the mansion was like living in a cult. But Hef's son Cooper is speaking out in defense of his late dad on Twitter. He wrote, "Some may not approve of the life my dad chose, but my father was not a liar. He was generous in nature and cared deeply for people. These salacious stories are a case study of regret becoming revenge." I actually tuned into this. This aired last night. I was just curious about it. I was watching TV. I'm like, ooh, I want to check this out. I talked last week. I'm like, isn't there some sort of mutual exchange? Which I still kind of agree, right? But it gets a lot deeper and a lot creepier than I thought at first. I could go into detail, but then I'll just explain the whole thing.
I want you to, but then I want to watch it at the same time.
Yeah, I do. I want to watch it.
I still agree with listen, he did do something for them, but does that mean everything they did was okay?
Yeah,
you
right.
know what I mean? I want to put it under that umbrella. It definitely gives you something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was an adult, but, when I was a younger adult, I went to the Playboy Mansion. I had friends Playboy is in Chicago, so I have friends who worked for Playboy. I would go to Playboy events. I never thought anything of it.
Right.
I'm like 21, 22 years old. Like, everybody's just there having fun,
Almost
right?
glorified it in some way, right? Yes.
But then when I look back on it, and I think that's what happens when you make decisions. It's not that you make decisions and you're like, oh, it's someone else's fault. You make decisions under different lenses of my niece is gonna be what I want, I just think of it differently. But it's so hard because it's is it revisionist history? Right. Are we trying to vilify when everybody was condoning and capitalized? Think about how much money Playboy merchandise alone has made over the years.
Still, there's rappers today that are named after Playboy that never knew it was a magazine, probably. I started thinking about this because I was looking for analogies, and I thought about Hugh, and if we're making it local, he reminds me of a single older guy with a nice house with a pool. And there's plenty of booze over there every Saturday and Sunday. You can stay as long as you want. Big TVs, lots of pretty people hanging around. And it's oh, whose house? Oh, this is Larry's house. Is he married? No. Kids? No. He just likes to have a bunch of 22-year-old girls at his house every day. And on its surface, nothing wrong with the pool. It's hot. But we all know as adults what's going on with Larry and his creepy pool.
And the sheds his grotto.
Yeah, and Larry only wears pajamas all day. Come on.
But listen, that's a great, hilarious analogy. But listen, Larry can't put you into the spotlight, and Larry can't give you a future afterwards, right? If you're one of Hugh's girlfriends, you have some clout, you have some room to work, you have a position in the industry now.
That's
right.
Yeah, but let's be honest, Larry can make you the princess of suburbia. Okay, insert your suburb name here.
Rancho Cucamonga. Larry with the pool for Rancho Cucamonga. All right, no offense, Rancho Cucamonga. We'll be right back.
Promotional consideration is brought to you by
Well, that sound means it is time to verify. Going on year 3 of the COVID pandemic, we have vaccines, we have 2 FDA-approved COVID pills, and we have monoclonal antibody treatments. But the latter 2 options are hard to get for most Americans suffering from COVID. That's why viewer Joel submitted this question. Is fluvoxamine a verified COVID therapeutic? Well, for context, fluvoxamine is an SSRI approved by the FDA to treat mental health conditions like obsessive compulsive disorder and depression. Can it also treat COVID? To verify, we consulted the National Institutes of Health, looked at a Washington University School of Medicine study published in the JAMA Network, and I talked with Dr. Cynthia Snyder, a Cone Health expert, who concluded, no, it's not a verified COVID therapeutic.
It's used for, I think, a gamut of different mental health situations, but that probably would not be the first and foremost drug that I would use. I would ask that your provider refer you to your maybe the local monoclonal antibody clinic that could see if you would qualify for that.
She mentioned there's also the antiviral drug remdesivir and Merck's and Pfizer's antiviral pills, molnupiravir and Paxlovid. But so far, no FDA approval for fluvoxamine for COVID. The WashU study looked at 152 patients who had COVID and were experiencing shortness of breath or pneumonia and needed supplemental oxygen. The results found patients who took fluvoxamine showed less clinical deterioration over 15 days than patients who took the placebo. But the study noted the need for more research with longer randomized trials. The National Institutes of Health agreed on this study and others. The agency emphasized there's insufficient evidence to recommend either for or against the use of fluvoxamine for the treatment of COVID-19, and it's not FDA approved for treating any infection. So we can verify the claim is false. Fluvoxamine is not a verified COVID therapeutic, at least not yet. That said, it does show some promise in several clinical trials. We'll just have to wait for more research. For now, use fluvoxamine only as prescribed by a doctor for its intended purpose. With your Verify, I'm Megan Malaris.
Vets are in high demand these days, and while you might think that's because of the surge in pandemic pet adoptions, the American Veterinary Medical Association says that's not the case. They found shelter adoptions in 2020 were actually the lowest they've seen in 5 years. The shortage has more to do with the Great Resignation. The rate of turnover among veterinarian practices is the highest of any medical field. The veterinarian turnover rate is twice the amount of a physician, with around 2,000 vets retiring every year. The top reason given was poor work-life balance. The other issue hitting vets right now is the fact that many pet owners put off treatments during the pandemic, and now they're trying to catch up. That's combined with continued COVID protocols that have decreased the amount of appointments a vet can handle in a day. So while demand for appointments has increased, vets are seeing fewer pets per day. All this making it harder for pet parents to find an open spot.
Welcome back. Making small upgrades to your home can save you money. We have some tips presented by American Home Shield. First, invest in a smart thermostat. This prevents your home from wasting gas or electricity. The auto feature also keeps your home from overworking to adjust temperature. Next, make sure your home is properly insulated. This keeps your HVAC system operating efficiently and can save you even more money. A home warranty plan from American Home Shield helps cover things homeowners insurance leaves out. You can rest easy knowing you're ready for whatever breakdowns strike next. Visit ahs.com to find a plan that's right for you. Got to get that HVAC system in check.
That's right.
All right, we're out of time. DBL's new every day. We'll see you tomorrow.